when living your truth covers a lie. In the world of coaching and spiritual self-help, you'll often hear the phrase "stand in your truth." It sounds noble, empowered, clean, but beneath that polished surface lies a dangerous idea that truth is whatever protects your narrative, even when it devastates those around you. I've lived it. This isn't a theoretical critique of coaching culture. It's a forensic examination of what happens when someone uses coaching ideology, NLP language, and spiritual bypassing to rewrite reality, justify betrayal, and destroy a family in the name of growth. And here's what I've come to understand. There is no harm so dark it can't be reframed as a breakthrough. The rebrand of reality. My ex-partner spent over a decade immersed in self-help, spiritual ideologies, and eventually, coaching, NLP, neurosemantics, integral leadership. Her bookshelf became a shrine to personal development. Her journal, a vision board of future wealth and alignment. And slowly, what was once a marriage, a real, gritty, love-filled partnership of 25 years, became a block. I was no longer her husband. I was a limiting belief. When she finally left, it wasn't for space or healing. It was to secure her next chapter. A man named Greg, a recently retired police officer, described by his late wife as a deeply loyal, selfless man. A man who had done the hard yards. Who had stayed through illness and grief. Just like his friends, cancer survivors who stood beside each other without needing to reframe their suffering as misalignment. And into that circle of resilience, my ex stepped, in a flowing dress, new colors chosen by a stylist, carefully curated language at the ready, living her best life. Finally aligned. Out of limbo. She erased the story of her betrayal and replaced it with something more palatable. I had to choose myself. Reframing, the coach's alibi. In coaching, reframing is everything. Events aren't what they are, they're what you decide they mean. And when you're coached in this ideology long enough, even infidelity, deception, and abandonment become justified. Even your ex-partner's suicide attempts, brought on by mixed messages and emotional whiplash, become signs that he just wasn't willing to grow. Because that's the quiet violence of coaching language. It makes the cause of harm the victim's responsibility. He couldn't let go. He was stuck in the past. I needed to protect my energy. She told herself she was protecting me, even as she ghosted me, kept secrets from our kids, instructed them not to speak of Greg, and watched as I unraveled in a room I could barely leave due to agoraphobia and depression. She told herself it was compassion. What it was image management. The lie that needed silence. The silence was intentional. She didn't introduce Greg to the kids gradually. She didn't come clean about the affair that preceded our separation. She didn't explain the emotional devastation her mixed messages caused. Because doing that would have forced her to face the story she didn't want to tell, the one where she hurt someone deeply for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with control, certainty, and wealth. She once told a manager at work, "I don't want to still be working at 65 while Pete's pottering in the garden." A throwaway line, maybe, but behind it sat the real motive. I wasn't the man who could manifest wealth. I was the man she would have to carry, and that didn't fit the story anymore. So she traded in 25 years for someone who had already built the life she wanted. A house, superannuation, status, no messy past with her. And because coaching teaches you to seek alignment, not accountability, there were no hard questions asked. No reckoning. Just a pivot. Standing in her truth, atop the wreckage. The first public photo I saw of them, Greg and her, flanked by his two friends who had survived cancer, was like a punch to the chest. Why? Because I remembered what she told me when I once clung to the idea that we shared a love of going to shows and musicals. "I don't really," she said flatly. Yet here she was, smiling at the theater. With him. With people who knew what it meant to stay. To fight. To honor love through sickness and grief. And standing among them was the woman who walked away because we didn't have anything in common. Because I was a block to her wealth manifestation, her vision board. The ideology, she said of once, was just an interest, not something she fully believed in. One that won hundreds of titles, webinars, MP3s, PDFs recently discovered, said otherwise. The coaching illusion, a cult of self. This is what coaching ideology allows. You can abandon loyalty and call it alignment. You can gaslight your children and call it protection. You can ignore another's suffering and call it boundaries. You can live a lie and call it your truth. When everything is reframable, nothing is accountable. And when spiritual thinking tells you the universe wants you to be wealthy, fulfilled, and free, the people who remind you of your promises become the threat. Even if they raised your kids. Even if they nearly died trying to understand what went wrong. I survived. But the truth didn't. If I hadn't survived my lowest point, if I had taken that final step, this story would have been hers to tell. I would have been remembered not as a loyal husband with flaws, but as the wounded ex who couldn't handle her growth. And my sons would have had to live with that narrative. Just like Greg's daughter had to live with her mother's suicide, but with one crucial difference. She honored her parents' pain. A podcast of grief and pain. Raw emotion that had me in tears as I listened to it numerous times. As I realized, this could have been my boys, trying to understand my suicide death, had it been successful. How devastating enough it was for my then 16-year-old to be the one who found me in bed having taken an overdose. Fighting the paramedics telling them I didn't want to live. My ex erased it. Reframed it. He just isn't handling it well. Well, it's hard to handle finding out your wife was having an affair, then telling you she was willing to work on our marriage when she was forgiven, only to end it again weeks later having continued contact with him where WhatsApp messages were found. Why would a man want to live when you have been mentally fucked around like that, let alone having never seen it coming in the first place as told in her story of transformation? Final words. This isn't about revenge. It's about clarity. It's about how dangerous coaching language becomes when it gives people permission to rewrite history, avoid remorse, and destroy others with a smile on their face and boundaries on their lips. And it's about naming something very few people are willing to say out loud. Not every truth is true. Not every growth is growth. And not everyone who claims to be a healer is harmless. Because sometimes the people who hurt you most do it while telling themselves and the world that they're saving you.